Hello, my name is Bill Blake, and today I'd like to talk with you about the underground treasures that abound in Northern Ontario. In case you're wondering, I'm a former Director of Education in Northern Ontario. I have worked with the First Nations along the west coast of James Bay for some 10 years in helping them improve their educational systems, and I am now a Senior Consultant with Norquest Associates. Here is the province of Ontario. In area, over 1 million square miles, making it the second largest province in Canada after Quebec. Of that territory, more than 197,000 square miles is covered by water. This amounts to about one-third of the total world supply of fresh water. Living in this province are some 13.5 million people, and that amounts to about 40% of the total Canadian population. This area is divided into two major drainage basins. The first flows northward into Hudson's Bay, and the second flows southward into the St. Lawrence Great Lakes area. Historically, this was of great significance in the early exploration and development of the Canadian nation. During the days of the fur trade, English fur traders used the northward flowing rivers to deliver their furs to companies operating out of Hudson's Bay, while the French-Canadian Courrier de Bois used the southward flowing rivers to travel inland and back to Montreal. Following the War of American Independence in the late 1700s, United Empire Loyalists flooded into southern Ontario. They were followed by waves of Scottish, English, and Irish settlers who were attracted by land grants and the opportunity to start a new life. The 1800s was a time of tremendous growth and development in southern Ontario. Today, the population pattern looks like this. Over 150 people per square mile live in the Greater Toronto Area and along the north shore of the Great Lakes. This drops to about 1 to 5 people per square mile in the southern parts of the Shield and to less than 1 person per square mile in the far north. By the early 1900s, the Precambrian rocks of the Canadian Shield started to attract daring prospectors who discovered vast mineral wealth. Major finds included nickel-copper in the Sudbury area, gold in Kirkland Lake, silver and cobalt in Cobalt, and gold and copper in the Timmins-Porcupine area. The mineral wealth in these areas is still being extracted and has led to significant further economic activity and urban growth. This area became known as the James Bay Frontier. If we divide the area in half, approximately, the northern part of this area was occupied by indigenous tribes who had lived there for centuries. Treaties were entered into between these tribes and the Government of Canada, protecting the inherent rights of these people. With the development of the mining industry in the southern half of the region, roads were constructed and a train service was provided by the Ontario Northland Rail Service, connecting the various centres in northern Ontario with southern Ontario. This railway extended only as far as Moosonee on the James Bay coast. In the northern half, it is either fly-in or in winter, use the winter ice roads. The second half of the 20th century saw the beginning of a search for diamonds in the Attawapiskat area. This search resulted in the discovery of 18 kimberlite pipes, of which 16 were diamond-bearing. De Beers established their Victor mine, located about 90 miles west of Attawapiskat. It is an open-pit mine that started full production in 2008 and in 2009 was named Mine of the Year. De Beers is committed to sustainable development in local communities and has signed community agreements with 4 of the First Nation communities in this area. And exploration continues. Then the provincial government decided they wanted in on the action. The Far North Act was introduced in June of 2009 and received royal assent on October the 25th, 2010. Its purpose was to provide community-based land use planning in this area. The Act sets out joint planning processes between the First Nations and Ontario. It establishes social and economic objectives for land use planning, and it also recognizes and affirms existing Aboriginal and treaty rights. The fact is that the far north is an area of vast resource potential and is under increasing pressure for resource exploration and development. It is occupied by some 49 First Nation communities grouped into some 7 tribal councils, all of which are members of the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation, NAN for short. The Far North Act became law without the informed consent of the NAN people and over their unanimous objection. In spite of their treaties and international obligations, the federal government of Canada did not intervene to protect the First Nations in the process leading up to this act. And so the story continues. This is the location of the De Beers Victor mine. In 2002, building on their success, De Beers went looking further, seeking more diamond deposits. What they discovered was copper and zinc. The exploration flurry that followed led to the discovery of the Ring of Fire and vast deposits of the extremely rare mineral called chromite. Chromite is an alloy that is used in the production of steel. The Ring of Fire is located about here. One find led to another and now includes nickel, copper, and gold. The discoveries were so great that it might take generations to fully exploit the deposits. Former Northern Development Minister Michael Gravel called it the home of one of the most promising mineral development opportunities in more than a century. A study done by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce in early 2014 determined the following. Our analysis shows that within the first 10 years of its development, the Ring of Fire will make significant contributions to Ontario's economy and will generate up to $9.4 billion in gross domestic product. It will generate up to $6.2 billion for Ontario's mining industry and sustain up to 5,500 jobs annually. These, of course, are full-time equivalents. And will generate nearly $2 billion in government revenue, divided between the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. With so much riding on the results of this development and other resources yet to be discovered, we cannot afford to make mistakes. Bob Ray, now the chief negotiator for the Mattawa Tribal Council, cautioned that in order to benefit from these riches, locals will need professional training and education, including reliable electricity and internet access. One problem: education for First Nation students is under the jurisdiction of the federal government and is generally not comparable in quality to that supplied by the Ontario government. Care must therefore be taken to ensure that any education provided to First Nations must be at least equal to that provided to off-reserve students in the province of Ontario. Such has not always been the case in the past, but it must be in the future if the residents of this area are to benefit from the treasures in their land. And so, thanks for watching our short video. And just remember, there is no point to the development of any land if the residents who occupy that land don't benefit. Bye for now.